Hi, everybody. I'm glad you're all back. I hope you enjoyed the networking session. And I will tell you, you are in for a very, very big treat. This is a powerhouse, all-star, amazing panel of people that I really, really like. I know several of them quite well, and I really respect them. And they are speaking not just to the world of CPG, but really the world of inclusivity and diversity in the entire startup ecosystem. I don't want to take the thunder out of anybody here speaking, but I will tell you this is a really phenomenal cast of characters. And with that, I think I'm just going to leave it right off to Amystedman because she's moderating this really great panel. So thank you all for joining us. Maybe I spoke too soon, which is often the case. There's Joy and Tam. And I guess we'll see Roman and Amy.
Hey, sorry, I was excited to talk.
Well, there's some familiar faces.
Hi, thanks for having us.
You guys, I'm taking off. You guys are going to be great. I am really dialed into this one. So thank you all very much. Enjoy.
Good to see you, Mark.
Always a pleasure.
So thanks for having us today. We have a very exciting and important conversation to have. Just wanted to start it off while saying, while Austin is a booming place for food technology and consumer packaged goods startups, as we know, our communities historically have a poor track record on racial issues, institutional bias, segregation, and underrepresentation. So today we're really going to go into how can underrepresented founders in the natural CPG, mobile food vendors, food entrepreneurs, and food growing space find resources and communities to build and collaborate with and to be successful. I'm going to introduce you to a panel of experts today who are deep in the trenches of CPG and are looking to make drastic changes in our industry and bring minority-owned businesses to the forefront. So I would like to introduce everybody real quick, and then if we can, I'll call out for introductions. If you can please tell us about who you are, what groups and companies you're involved with, and just share it quickly so we can move on to our wonderful questions. So Joy Chevalier, please start for us. Oh, Joy, I think you might be muted.
I'm totally muted.
There you are.
It's always great to see all of you. And thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Joy Chevalier. I'm the Cook's Nook here in Austin, which is a culinary incubator. We help folks, entrepreneurs, corporates, and their brands get to market with new products and whatever they're doing in food, which is pretty awesome. And we also are handling the Keep Austin Together program, which is distributing meals during the pandemic here across Central Texas. So yeah, I said a whole bunch of stuff, and it's pretty cool. Glad to be here.
Thanks for being here, Joy. Roman, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Roman Gonzalez. I'm the founder and CEO of Gardenio, a new kind of garden club membership to send you everything you need every season to grow your own food at home with an app and a community to help you as you grow. My background originally from Corpus Christi, Texas, marketing, media production, and user experience design, and have over the past few years through Divink specifically been a large advocate for funding for minority and women-owned businesses, and it's something I'm really passionate about. Formerly on the Travis County Food Policy Board, and just really passionate about helping people grow food.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Tam, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Tam Hawkins. I'm the president and CEO of the Greater Austin Black Chamber of Commerce, and I get to work with cool companies like Joy's and Me and the Bees, like Michaela Ulmer, and a wonderful host of other companies that are non-CPG related as well.
Awesome. And Edwin.
Thanks so much. I'm Edwin Marty. I'm the food policy manager with the City of Austin's Office of Sustainability, and I was hired to help provide strategic direction for the City of Austin in terms of how to make our food system a better, more sustainable, and more equitable program. So working on a whole range of issues, we touch the CPG world in a whole lot of ways, generally the cities in a regulatory fashion. And part of my job is to help the city think more strategically and less regulatorily, and more about how do we really foster a better community. So really excited to participate in this dialogue and just delighted to be here. So thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. And I am your moderator. I'm Amystedman. I'm also an entrepreneur. I have an alcohol beverage company called Future Proof. We make Beatbox. I'm also one of the founders of Naturally Austin, which is a community organization to foster responsible entrepreneurship for the planet and for inclusivity in the natural product space. So we started that to further these conversations. And so I'm really excited to continue this today. So let's start with the big picture. What are the biggest challenges in regard to minority representation, inclusion in consumer packaged goods, natural products industry in Austin at the moment? And Tam, if we can open up to you for start.
The funniest thing is I knew you were going to ask Joy first. It's quite frankly, I think a little boring. It's a similar issue that most minority businesses face in general, and it's access to capital. They have a hard time even giving all things the same in terms of credit, in terms of expertise, in terms of information and all that. They still have this barrier of getting the same amount of capital. I have some incredibly smart business owners who, when they go to get finance, they're already at least a 30% gap in funding disparity. And again, and there's this notion is that, if they knew more about credit, if they were more financially literate, I mean, the whole song and dance, I see Roman nodding his head and I love it because it's just as accurate as I paint pictures I can paint. So that's the biggest challenge.
And Joy, is that something you've seen with your entrepreneurs as well?
Absolutely. I think it happens at a couple of levels. At the level that Tam says around access to capital, absolutely. I think there's also another conversation to be had, and that is sort of financial literacy, awareness, preparedness, and understanding of the language of the world that many new entrepreneurs are stepping into. They're not from food, or they may not be from business. Many are not, but they've managed to have this product or this new offering, and it may be very popular, very successful within their communities, but reaching out and branching out of that is often a challenge, and how to step out of that universe and being comfortable in doing so. I think that is often a first place that is a gap, and there's no place to learn that, to become familiar with that, to gain the stuff that some of us have gotten through business experience or other professional experience, or engaging with other products, vendors or whatever that may be. And so that education, that literacy, financial and otherwise, I think is really important, and gets people on their way. And that for me is a gap that we often see as well.
Yeah, Roman, I'd love to pull you into this conversation as well and share some of those nuances that, we all know there's a funding issue, but how does that really play out?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like we could certainly have a long conversation about. Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly have a large conversation around just the lack of access to capital, but oftentimes that sort of manifests itself in ways that we're not even particularly familiar, right? So oftentimes there's the conversation about, there's not enough education, and I think Joy's speaking to something that's real and true, and is something that I went through and many of my peers have gone through, but also many of my peers are there, and I love what you said, Tam, because it was this conversation of like, if we're just better, right? If we're just better founders, right? And we just work harder and read the right books, and then we're going to be successful. And overwhelmingly, and I'm part of a founder circle of people of color, we talk all the time, and it is just not true, right? It's this sort of this perpetual false narrative of a meritocracy, and that's not me necessarily. It is a little bit. But I think the part that a lot of people don't talk about either is that the sources of capital when you're an early stage company often come from angel investors. And so if your funding sources come from angel investors, often they're sort of premised on the idea that you have to have all the right numbers, et cetera. Where do you get the funding to have the right numbers? Who knows? But that's not their problem. And so if they're not built off that, oftentimes they're built off relationships, right? And so who, there's certainly the question of access to those relationships. Will somebody take a meeting with you if they feel like you don't have the numbers because you don't have the right funding to even get the numbers, et cetera? But there's this intangible kind of social and cultural thing, right? Like if I'm, now I'm a 31-year-old Latinx dude, but if I'm trying to relate to, somebody in his 60s who drives or who has like a private jet and vacations in Aspen and whatnot, like there's this kind of cultural barrier sometimes that isn't often talked about of how am I with my interest sets and my passions to find a reliable way to relate to you, right? Just as an individual, we come from two different worlds. And so that's this other gap that isn't funding, that isn't financial. It's a kind of cultural gap. And, I've learned as much as I can about cocktails and wines and cheeses. Like I can talk the talk. But it's, that's not everything. And, I come from, I have the degree, a lot of startup experience, but still, and we can talk about this probably in a second, but have had experiences where people just don't take me seriously when they first meet me. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I really relate. So y'all might not know this, but I'm an immigrant to this country. I moved here with my family from Syria when I was 10 years old. And starting a company when you don't have that network ready to go is very overwhelming, and was probably my primary goal for going to business school, was just to like have access to those worlds, right?
Yeah.
To be able to do entrepreneurship. So I just want to bring in Edwin for this conversation as well and ask you what you guys are thinking about from the city perspective on this.
Yeah, thanks so much. And maybe I can just kind of help round out that conversation. There's a famous old saying that you need three things to get rich. And maybe you've all heard this, but the first one is you got to be willing to work hard. And I think that everybody on this panel will equally agree that that is not the issue in terms of what the barriers are. Zero question. There's willingness to work hard across the board. You got to get lucky. Can't really control that one. But the third one is really important. You got to know rich people. So you got to be willing to work hard, you got to get lucky, and you got to know rich people. Those are the three things that all rich people have in common. They had those three things going for them. And so, I think what you've all pointed out is, without that sort of foundation, and Roman, maybe I'll point out the thing it sounds like you're missing is golf. So the reason that there's golf in the world is to be able to hang out with rich people. And it's absurd, but I'll be the first to say, in the community that I grew up in Alabama, golf was the place that business happened. And without an invitation to a country club or some facility like that, it's very unlikely that you have the structured set of time to have conversations and build trust. So let me circle back to my job as the food policy manager. So there's a structural inequity in our society. Not everybody gets to play golf with rich people and sort of have the time to pitch their ideas. So what do we do as a society to recognize that there is inequity in the way things have been structured for lots of reasons? So are there policy issues that we can start driving into and start asking questions about what are the opportunities to level this playing field? And Amy, I think your example of, you go to business school if you don't know a bunch of rich people in hopes that you meet a bunch of rich people.
Right. They also have a golf class, I'll tell you that.
For sure. So, all jokes aside, there are public policies that can be enacted to address some of those inequities. And access to funding is, without question, the biggest one. I think if I had all the money in the world, I'd start a bank. I should get out of public policy and get into banking. The opportunities to address inequities lay within the banking world. And there are different ways to do banking. When you look at the racial demographics of who's in control of our banks, it's stunning and not stunning at all. It's exactly what you would expect. And so, what are the trickle down impacts of that? And where are there public policy opportunities to address the inequities in the banking world, and who gets access to that capital? I think there's some really interesting things to look at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level around what kind of policies we might be able to start driving into. But all of that starts with representation. And I think it's really worth noting, when you look at the major people in charge of the institutions that drive a lot of the funding in the food space, the USDA, the Texas Department of Agriculture, we could pretty quickly assess that there's probably not great representation from minority communities at the leadership level in those organizations. And is there a voice that's being missed by that lack of representation? So, it's a policy issue, but it's also a question of who are we voting for? And not to get overtly political too quickly in this conversation, but I do think it's critically important that we think long and hard about who's creating the policies that perpetuate the inequities, or who could be creating different kinds of policies that address the inequities at a deep systemic level. We got a lot of opportunities in this country right now, in the state and in the city. So it is an exciting time. And I think that for me is the primary issue.
Yeah, thanks. Do any of our panelists of color want to share anything else about their experiences in Austin, so we can fully understand what we're dealing with here before we move on to talk about solutions and things like that?
Annie, I'd like to add that, along with the question that you asked, a fair amount of grace. We don't often see minority-owned businesses get the same amount of grace and women-owned businesses as well as some others. They're not allowed the grace to fail in a way that helps them grow, and they're condemned to and seen as incompetent and not able to generate revenue. So,
for the grace to fail. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll kind of tag team on that too. So people of color founders, both within tech and with consumer goods, historically, even when they do get the funding, oftentimes, and I think DocSend just did some research on this, it is not near the same amount of funding. And that funding can be correlated to a startup's ability to fail, like you're saying, Tam, and to continually fail and learn and figure things out. More capital does not necessarily equal, the same amount of efficiency, but assuming, a competent operator, they're just not the same opportunities to figure it out. So it's like, okay, well, we gave you the money and you still failed. Well, you kind of weren't set up for success in the amount that you were actually able to raise at that point. So.
Joy, anything else you'd like to add before we move on here?
No, actually, Tam and Roman hit a lot of the, sort of big things. My experiences is sort of my own or watching others, try to go out into these spaces. I would just only add on, this. I keep coming back to a person's individual experience sitting when they sit in front of others and they're making the request, and the ability to make a request, the ability to see people who look like you, who will understand where you're coming from in this business and how far you've come along in the business. And some of the feedback that we often hear is people just have a lot of anxiety about being in new and different spaces where they're being judged, and they have that fear of failing, or they have to get it right the first time somehow, that there's less rope, less runway for them to be able to iterate or move through a process. And people find themselves very much, that's a real barrier. That's a real barrier to engagement, to even wanting to move into spaces. And I always find it interesting to ask you, how do you overcome that? I mean, certainly there's systemic and institutional things that have already been talked about, but I think there's also something else that is needed with our entrepreneurs that we try to give to them, so that they're prepared to be in spaces, that they themselves are prepared to be in these spaces. It's really kind of hard to explain and sort of quantify, but it's something about the individual and where they're coming from that makes them prepared to be in front of a new audience of people, and talking about their product, their work, their company in a different way, in a different manner.
So it's not just getting funded, it's the comfort with asking for the funding to begin with and the comfort in those worlds. And then after you get funded, how you're treated by those investors and advisors and mentors, and whether you're given the grace to fail or, the same expectations that white founders are had for the same funding.
And that's it. I think you just hit on the nail on the head right there about those expectations. Amy. Absolutely. And expectations of self and the perceived expectations of others.
Right. Have you noticed anything that's changed in the past 5 years here in Austin? Or do we predict that there will be major changes in the next 5 years? Long-term Austinites, please join in and let us know what you're thinking. Tam, you wanna open us up for that one?
I was going to say that knocks me out. I'm not a long-term.
Oh, you're not.
Austinite.
You're not.
I've been here since 2012.
Okay.
But
Well, at least the past 5 years you've been here.
I think this focus on some of the work that some of these people on the panel, quite frankly, have done. What you guys have been able to do is highlight CPG in a way that I don't know if necessarily was focused before. So I'm hopeful that we'll see some more investors take you seriously in a different way. And I'm being careful with my words because I don't want to say that they didn't before, because there were some very successful companies that were minority founded owners that came out of here. But what I'm happy to see is that number is growing. And I am hopeful that it'll continue to grow.
So creating go ahead, Joy.
I was just going to add, I said also to that point, that focus. I mean, you're seeing more people and more faces, more folks stepping into these spaces and bringing others with them, and launching businesses or ideas and concepts in pairs and teams, and definitely building that circle and that network, what little network you may have around you to bring with you in this, that brings that comfort and that security, that confidence to be out in those spaces. Stuff like this, you're seeing folks ask those questions of a lot more, even than you saw 2 years ago or 4 years ago, for that matter.
Totally agree with you, Joy. Totally agree.
So the community is getting larger, and that's creating more comfort, which will hopefully encourage and even more founders and even more people in this industry to get engaged.
Yeah.
Roman, what do you think about the past 5 years and any predictions for the future?
Yeah, I think over the past 5 years, 5 years ago, I think Div Inc. was maybe just spinning up, or it was just before I think it was before they started spinning up. And so you have resources like that. Notley has a bunch of resources now. Naturally, Austin and Skew have a POC focused kind of accelerator program. So you're seeing more presence there. Now, I do think that along with these programs, many of the ones I mentioned don't often come with capital associated, or at least not necessarily. Some of them do in some form. And so I'm always interested in sort of like, we can talk, we can have more things that say we're going to educate the people of color and things like that. But I'm really primarily concerned with the flow of capital. And I think Austin is a particular, like, I don't necessarily blame Austin for spending money the way it has. It's a very complex reason why the ecosystem operates the way that it does, why it funds the people it does, having to do with who's been successful in the past. But I do think that, 5 years ago, we would just be seen as complaining right now. Whereas right now, hopefully, while there's still going to be 10% of people who think that we're complaining, there's just a greater consciousness. And we'll never forgive the bloodshed that had to create that consciousness. But that it's here is important and valuable. And over the next 5 years, I anticipate we'll see more funding. I think that conversation is pretty key and crucial and kind of at the top of people's minds in the community. I know of several efforts right now in regard to that. I think we'll have more POC getting funding. I think we'll have more success stories. You're going to see this fantastic Gardenio exit at some point, and it's going to trickle down too. So I'm really excited about all of that.
Edwin.
Excellent. Well, I'll just echo Roman and say I'm expecting the Gardenio exit to create incredible opportunities for other startups. So welcome that future. Well, I sometimes have been known to make an analogy about the food system, and I'll just take a minute here to roll this out. So I think about the food system as a train going down a train track. And back when I first got involved with this world in college, I jumped on the train and tried to grab the wheel and change the direction of the food system because I knew that it was not going in the right direction. And quickly found out that trains don't have wheels to change their direction. They go on tracks, and they go basically wherever the track has been laid. The food system is similar. The tracks that have been laid drive the direction of the food system. I think it's really important in this conversation specifically to recognize that what we do right now is not necessarily changing the direction of the train, but it's building different tracks. It's building different bridges to different communities that haven't been served in the same way. It's creating switching stations for the trains to go in different directions, and it's creating new stops for the train that didn't exist. We know that the food system as it exists now doesn't stop for everyone the same way. It doesn't serve all communities in the same way. And the CPG community, I think, and people of color would be an absolutely perfect example in this metaphor. So what my job at some level, along with others that I work with in the city and the county and our food policy community, is to look at the 5-10 year landscape and say, where are the bridges that need to be built? Where are the switching stations that need to be installed? And how can we hope that that new track system actually leads to additional funding for startups represented by people of color, et cetera. It's hard to sort of push that though, because basically what I say is like, well, we're doing things that are going to have an impact in 5 years, trust me. And I don't have a whole lot to show for it today. I've got a whole lot of stuff in my work plan, but nothing that I can say we have instantly solved this challenge. So the work that we're talking about, well, I should say the barriers that are in place currently took hundreds of years to create, maybe thousands of years. And we're going to need time to build new tracks. So the funding needs to be identified immediately. The CPG companies that are waiting in the wings to get started need that today. And we need a big community that understands we have to be looking down the road, literally down the tracks 5-10 years out to see where those new policies need to be laid to create a different future.
So these are the new tracks that we're laying, right? And when I was trying to follow the metaphor.
So yes, exactly. So we're basically in this conversation, we're starting to identify where those new tracks are that need to be laid. We're identifying, I think, a bridge that needs to be built. We don't necessarily know exactly what the bridge is going to look like, and we don't necessarily have the materials on hand to build that bridge. But this conversation, along with many other conversations, identifies that there is a bridge missing in this part of the landscape. And what that I can do with others' support is try to figure out where the materials are to build that bridge and try to make sure that we have access to the land to build the bridge, et cetera, to move down that metaphor. So yes, identifying where the gaps are in our current train track system, and then figuring out, once we know that, how to build those pieces.
So I'll just bring this back to Roman. What are like some really practical, critical changes that we can make here in our community to face the future more effectively? And want to come back to Tam and Joy with that as well.
Yeah, I think in the startup ecosystem, I gave a talk recently about the PreSeed Funding Gap, particularly for founders of color. I think it exists generally in Austin, and it's significantly accentuated for people of color. And kind of my thesis there was that there need to be more pre-seed level investors and even dedicated networks and funds, the organization of that layer. And when you say that there needs to be, I think that also takes a sort of, my proposal is an additional education to existing angel investors within the Austin ecosystem. I think they have often been trained to invest in a particular way, oftentimes expecting Series A or a Series Seed level traction with next to no funding. That comes from a lot of things, and happy to dig into that another time. But I think it takes an attitudinal change, and hopefully, what I'm hoping again from all of the sort of publicity that now these conversations are getting is that we realize that just in the same way where we spend our dollar can, on a sustainable bag can make a difference in the larger scheme of things. It's part of a bigger systemic problem, but it's something we can do. That investing in people of color is part of this making the world how we want it. You know, we're making a moral choice anytime we throw our money anywhere. And the more that we own that and are critical of that and think about what our values are, I think that we'll find more folks that are investing toward people of color. And I think it's very important to say that it is not an act of charity to invest in a person of color, right? Or women or LGBTQIA plus people. It is not. Just in the same way, it's not an act of charity to, give $300,000 to, a white guy out there too. You still have the expectations of a business, but we understand that at the pre-seed level that things are so nebulous that we can't know, right? It is actually irrational to invest at the pre-seed level for so many reasons. And so I think we have to embrace that and sort of say like, hey, let's take our sort of facade of like numbers driven, kind of have to have everything figured out right now and really shift it to like, where are our values? Because we're betting all the time on our values anyway. So I think we're going to see more of that. I think that's a strategic tactical change. I think the conversation about funding needs to get even bigger and bigger and people press more and more and not just, hey, we take 10% of our meetings with underrepresented founders, which a VC in town publicizes a win. And so calling them out, having conversations like this, that's at least one of many things that we can be doing.
So I'm hearing training in angel investors on how to invest in pre-seed and not having ridiculous expectations for a company that has not raised any money yet in terms of traction. And at least giving them the same benefits that they would give a white founder, right? On a pre-seed investment. And then also having dedicated networks and funds for that early stage to help lift up founders that don't have these rich uncles and friends and family that they're supposed to go to, right?
Yeah, I think definitely a democratization of that particular, that level. So many things are happening all over the country at the seed level, which is really fantastic to see. And we're going to see a lot of movement there. But when we think about the pipeline, we're not going to see the quantity and the quality of ideas until we address things on that fundamental level.
Right. Joy?
And these guys basically said what I was going to say, was that aligning our values, aligning investment values to recognize that a pipeline has to be developed, supported, and nurtured, and it's in earlier stages than people might like to think, and that's not a negative investment. And matter of fact, the earlier you can help some of these entrepreneurs who are coming out of overlooked spaces or spaces that you would not have expected, you will often find that with that early hand and reach in, even with those funds, the education, the other things that we talked about, that they can get on a track pretty quickly. And there's a return there as you begin to pull them. I like your train track analogy there, Edwin, as you pull them along that line. And I think folks would be, just because you have to do it earlier, doesn't necessarily make it harder. I just think the opportunity for a bigger return to everybody is there when you actually go into those pre-seed areas. And that's where you'll really find a lot of really great new nascent folks and products.
And Tam?
So Roman, as you were speaking, Joy already knows she's probably one of my spirit animals, but you are my kindred spirit. I ditto to what both of you said. What I also think that's part of the conversation is you're going to see, and you're continuing to see, like niche markets from people of color, and where the giants kind of fail to kind of acknowledge these spaces. So there's great opportunities. So when I get in front of investors, I oftentimes tell them that, you're missing a whole market here and an opportunity to invest and make money, and nobody's giving money to them. And so you're just from a pure investment standpoint, it is a good business to look at that more closely and see your areas of opportunity.
And even Tim, even in these pre-seed places, a
because
little will go
they're
a long
oftentimes
way.
crappy, right? Because they're used to being underfunded, they're used to being underestimated, so they have grit and determination in a way that I don't and not always see in other business owners, right? And they know that they have to nail it. You talked about that fear of failure and having to nail it on the first try. Yeah,
Nailed the first time, and having a very focused target and directed funding and directed information and knowledge. I mean, like I said, I think that return opportunity there is just huge to see a complete change in a company.
I'll also
in
say, just as a small addition to what I said before, that when we talk about who angel investors are, I think that part of this sort of systemic effort is pulling in people into the angel investing scene and that may not have normally seen themselves as such. This doesn't necessarily just have to be people of color and women, but I think oftentimes there's so many people who are actually quite well off who could invest, who could do angel investing, are accredited, but they don't see themselves as that. We just had a conversation with somebody from elementary who has done well for himself and is now interested and has never invested in startups. We're going through the education process, but it's an incredible thing. We actually don't know how much wealth is around us and what we can do with our wealth to push things forward.
Right. So for the minority founders or professionals that may be joining us today, Roman, can you kind of share the groups in town? I know you mentioned a few earlier, but what are the people that are out there trying to make a difference that were good allies for professionals and founders of color at this time?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously you and Joy can speak to. Naturally, Austin is doing some really great work, and there's actually a fellowship named after one of the people on this call, I believe, Joy. And so there's cool opportunities like that. Again, SKU and Naturally Austin have a partnership coming up specifically for consumer goods. That's good to look into. There's some efforts that are kind of like a little under the hood. I'm not sure if they're announced yet, but we'll just say that there are dedicated funds that are going to start going to founders of color through a resource in the community. And we're going to see how that plays out. I want to be involved in it as I can. I think instead of that, I would very much encourage people to look outside of Austin. I love the town. I love the scene. It's been, very good to me. But as soon as we looked outside of Austin, there are incredible levels of wealth and resources and social and intellectual capital on the coasts in Colorado. There are funds like, if you look at Harlem Capital, if you look at New Age Capital, look at Lolita Taub if you're a Latinx investor, Clio Capital, Precursor Ventures. Incredible amounts of capital and people that are organizing. And I don't think we should be afraid or be too homebound when it comes to the success of people of color. So definitely look some of those people up and make connections and really find out the wealth of resources that the national community of colors is leveraging to try and solve the same problem.
Joy, can you tell us a little bit about the new track that's being started with Naturally Austin, SKU, and Cook's Nook?
Sure, absolutely can. So thanks for that, Roman. So we're really fortunate that our organization, Naturally Austin, here in town, which is, as Amy's already described, focused on our natural and organic and CPG products and arenas. And one of the things that we're establishing inside Naturally Austin and along with SKU is to create to provide this incubation towards acceleration in a more clear and defined manner. It is called the Joy Chevalier Fellowship. That's part of it. SKU is the other part. Overall, we call it the modus operandi track, the MO track, which comes with education for those who are coming into the program, incubation, a 12-week program, along with the ability to go into SKU after that. Into their acceleration and well-known programming. And in that way, we can do some of the things that we just talked about on this call, which is to educate, to mentor, to advocate, to empower those entrepreneurs, Black and brown entrepreneurs, very specifically in the CPG space, to build those companies, to help them hone in on the needs for those companies. And then as they start to hit milestones and to find themselves gaining that traction, then they immediately go into acceleration. That's also a part of that. It allows us also to see a pipeline into our communities and into some of these spaces to encourage those next sets of companies and give them a definitive method of gaining the things that we've talked about in a structured way. I am delighted by it. I'm excited that we've got that vision here in Austin, Central Texas, in Naturally Austin. The folks on this call are amazing, contributors to that vision concept. And I know Naturally Austin's excited. We are at the Cook's Nook, I am, and I know Skew is also excited. And we can't wait to start this first group of folks, hopefully in January of 2021.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that new program with us. Opening up to Tam and Edwin as well, any other resources that you want to share for professionals of color in our industry, or perhaps resources or suggestions for white allies that do want to be part of the change in this industry and help people of color in our industry? Oh, sorry.
I could just say the opportunity for municipal governments to address some of the pre-seed funding gaps is an interesting one. It's something I've spent a fair amount of time talking to folks about. I think the issue is, how can municipal funding address the sort of the risk factor? And I would love to see municipal funding accept a certain level of risk around investing in its community. We do a really good job at the city of investing in our nonprofit communities. That's kind of the way that cities generally work. I think there has to be sort of a rethinking of that. How can we, create a public-private partnership where the city is a big part, but not necessarily the driver? We're playing around with this thing called a Good Food Fund. It was developed in Michigan, a couple of other places around the country. Public-private partnerships where there's municipal funding, there's private sector funding, and there's academic support, all wrapped into a umbrella fund. That's what I'd love to see happen here in Austin. I think it needs to be done with a specific lens of addressing the existing inequities in our community. So we'll see where that goes.
Awesome. Tam?
Yes. So one of the things, Edwin, I love that you lead with policy, and because I often say that the bad news is we're here. The good news is we got here by policy, and so that means we can undo policy. And so, of course, I'm going to advocate for joining your local chambers. Your ethnic chambers are a wealth of resources, mine included. There's several for here in Austin, and the other resources are the chambers. I'm sorry, give me a minute. The chambers, we have relationships that we often try to facilitate. So that's why I'm a huge advocate for
just being a partner to people that may have a hard time navigating the community otherwise. So y'all are a friendly ally for that. Thank you for doing that work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll just admit I'm a very large fan of the Chamber of Commerce here in Austin.
Well, we probably have time for one audience question just before we wrap up here. Thank you guys so much. We have one that came in. Is there a database where you found these investing resources?
I'm really happy to talk about this.
Roman, go
if you
for
don't
it.
mind. So this is one of the hardest parts of finding out who even invests, right? And then you have to find the warm introduction to them, and et cetera. So if you are a Black female founder, if you're a Latinx founder, Google Lolita Taub, Taub. She's made these comprehensive resources of national pre-seed funds to Series A funds, entrepreneurs to watch. Incredible resource there. They also just launched something called the Community Fund. I actually produced a list of about 150 investors just for manual searching. And now I have a list of my own. So that was for DivInc. By the way, DivInc is your friend and ally. Go to divinc.org, donate to them, try and be a part of them. And so now I have a list for consumer goods and tech, because that's where we're at, of around 200 feel free to, I say this hesitantly, reach out to me and I'll help as best I can. It's unfortunate that we have these particular points in sort of in people, but also look at Angel List. The way I created that list is like, I just Googled angel investor on LinkedIn. Continue to go to networking events, be kind to people, and then they'll be more than willing to introduce you to more people that will introduce you to more people. It's still very organic like that. It's like that for a lot of people. I will say that increasingly they're more like Lightship Capital. They don't take warm introductions. It's all cold. And they do that to try and break down that whole, you got to know a guy who knows a guy kind of thing. So that's a handful of resources. Conduit is another one. Yeah, just reach out.
Roman, you can just send it to me and I'll send it to all the chambers.
I'll do it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Making moves. Well, I just want to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for taking on this important topic and sharing these resources and ideas with our audience today. Hi, Mark.
Hey there. What a phenomenal panel. Congratulations to everybody. This was just fascinating to me personally. I know many of you personally, and I've heard you speak, but this was probably one of the best times I've ever heard, the really dialing down into this topic, which is so critically important to Austin. And so once again, thank you all for joining us. And I think you really elucidated all of the resources and activities and things going on in Austin. And it's really important that we focus on our BIPOC and women in the market, especially in CPG. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you so much.